Hello, everyone, and welcome to what is our third SEAL conversation. As you are surely aware, we find ourselves in what seems like ever-increasing uncertainty surrounding not only COVID, but also the political, economic, and social environment in many countries, as well as globally. I nevertheless hope that you and those around you, either physically or emotionally, are well. If you missed our first two installments, head over to our YouTube channel where we will upload this iteration the next day or so. And having just had a look at the registrations, we're very heartened to see over 300 registrants from all over the world and hailing from pretty much all walks of professional life. Academia, international organizations, governments, NGOs, private practice, and companies. And as you know, and you should take this as yet another call to arms, if you will, we've asked our members and those who are not yet members, so we hope you will become one soon, to suggest panels, and we're presenting you with one of those panels today. If you have suggestions, please be in touch through the SEAL website or email one of the officers. Our coordinates are not really hard to find. So our topic today is, as you know, African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement in an era of waning multilateralism. That's a mouthful. And we have both optimists and skeptics on the panel. It's a topic dear to my own heart as it combines questions of multilateralism and regionalism. And as a European myself, you would think that my first inclination is to see how it compares to the EU, but I'm interested in how the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement and its members navigate the course for the agreement and the institutions that come along with it in their own right, with the potential opportunities and challenges that such an effort brings with it. And certainly made much more interesting, shall we say, given today's environment. We have today what promises to be a panel that, as the title suggests, has the potential for some fireworks, being made up of both optimists and skeptics. We have Olabisi Akinkugbe of the Schulich School of Law at Dalhousie University in Canada. We have Ohio Omiunu, senior lecturer at the Leicester de Montfort School of Law, soon to be Dr. Vellah Kigwiru, doctoral candidate at the Technical University of Munich and a guest researcher at the Max Planck Institute for Innovation and Competition in Germany. And last but not least, Dr. Regis Simo, a senior researcher at the Mandela Institute of the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa. And of course, we're very grateful and very fortunate for Melaku Desta having agreed to moderate this panel. He's currently with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and transitioning back, as I understand, to Leicester de Montfort School of Law as well. So without any further ado, Melaku, the floor and panel is yours.
Thank you, Marcus, for that introduction. We have a very limited time, as I have been told. So I will go straight to the discussions. I will give a few kind of opening remarks, just to put the topic of the discussion in context. I see quite a large number of participants, as Marcus said, from all over the world. So greetings to all of you in all the time zones across the world. The topic of our conversation is designed to be very provocative. As you can see from the introduction already, optimists and skeptics. Hopefully there will be more optimists and skeptics on the panel as well as elsewhere, but we are here to entertain all ideas, all views, because ultimately I'm sure they will only help us. Africa today is a source of hope and optimism on several fronts. Although the continent is being hit hard by the COVID pandemic and then suffering from the economic ills, I think the future is very bright. It's a young continent bursting with energy, entrepreneurship, and opportunity, and it's a vibrant place, confident, positive, and forward-looking. And the very subject of our conversation, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, is a major factor behind this positive outlook. The signing of the agreement represents a significant step forward in Africa's long-held ambition to integrate the small and fragmented markets of the continent, to create a single continent-wide market, and to realize the untapped potential of the continent and make it a place of opportunity for all its children. I'm aware that we are talking about this at a time when the world seems to be turning away from rules-based multilateralism towards power-based unilateralism, by and large. The one institution that we thought would remain the anchor of multilateralism in economic relations, the WTO, is itself under stress. Many of us have written a lot of critical things about the WTO itself, but African countries have always believed that a world with the WTO, imperfect as it is better than one without it. By concluding the Cfta agreement, I think African governments are sending the message that a rules-based engagement is the way to go, and they are leading by example. But of course, as the title suggests, not everyone is clearly convinced about this, and hence the reference to optimists and skeptics. My position is clear. Africa's future is very bright. It is one of hope and progress, of confidence and optimism, ambition and action. But that's not to suggest that the conclusion of the agreement itself or the conclusion of the agreement alone is going to be sufficient in itself. It will not be. It's an important step, but like any agreement, the Cfta is also as good as only its implementation. And Africa's record on this front is not something to be proud of. We will admit that. But even here, I see some good reasons for optimism. For a while, I was working in South Africa at the Africa Peer Review Mechanism. And African leaders are speaking truth to each other through that mechanism and elsewhere. If you recall, the AU reform process led by Rwandan President Paul Kagame recently, and his 2017 report, you will see what I'm talking about. If it's worth the read. And Africa is not just agreeing to a new rule book, it's also revisiting its institutional structures for implementation and follow-up. That's why I say the future is bright, but bright doesn't necessarily mean it is going to be without its own challenges. But today I'm only a moderator and a participant in this conversation, and we have a stellar team of researchers and scholars who are here to help us with our collective conversations. And as Marcus has already introduced them, I'm not going to repeat that. I will go straight with to ask one of our colleagues, Regis. I will give each of them 3 to 4 minutes to give us their opening remarks, and then we'll go straight into the questions and answers. Regis, you'll be talking to us on trading goods and services, probably focusing on services. Would you like to start on that, please? Unmute yourself, Regis, please. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, this is always a challenge. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Melaku, and thank the SIEL for organizing this important discussion about the EFCTA. Well, without further ado, I think we should first understand, to give a brief understanding of the EFCTA, although I won't take long on that specific issue. Basically, it entered into force last year on the 30th of May, after the ratification threshold of signature has been met. Basically, the EFCTA has a scope. The scope of the EFCTA is defined itself in the agreement as including, as covering trading goods, trading services, investment, intellectual property rights, and competition policy. From this perspective, basically, it is a WTO-X. It is a WTO-X agreement in the sense that obligations that are negotiated actually goes beyond the WTO mandate, and which is something that should be praised also. Also, the speed at which the ratification was recorded and deposited is also something that should be praised, in the sense that in the past, this has not always been the case. Also, there is also one feature that needs to be also highlighted, the fact that goods and services were negotiated concurrently is also something that should be mentioned, in the sense that up to now, trade agreements in Africa, or maybe somewhere else, have been following a particular linear model, in the sense that services were always left for the final stage of negotiations. In this case, this was not the case, in the sense that the FTA was tackled goods and services at the same time. So I was saying that the scope of agreement is defined to include services, goods, investment, intellectual property, and competition. This means that any other introduction of any other topic we have to go through amendment in the sense that any new common issues like what has been the musing around the e-commerce, for instance, we have to first satisfy the amendment procedures. So focusing on services, I believe that, or at least my take on the protocol on trade and services is that it's a regional codification of the GATT, having been negotiated, of course, in the ages of the GATT. It actually borrowed a lot from the General Agreement on Trade and Services, of the WTO General Agreement on Trade and Services. It could not have been otherwise, I think, because it was negotiated after the GATT was concluded. So it borrowed a lot from that. And also, maybe one of the reasons why previous trade agreements did not tackle services was also because, so most of them were negotiated at a period of time when the WTO was not had not yet come into force. So basically, the disciplines on the GATT was not really widely known to these trade agreements. So when I say it is the regional codification, it's because it borrows a lot from the GATT, although there are some peculiarities that I will mention later on, if time permits. First of all, the definition of services is the same, like in the GATT, in the sense that it defines the services through the 4 modes of supply, mode 1, mode 2, and 3, and 4. The scheduling mechanism is also the same. The modalities for the trade and services, it follows the GATT in the sense that it adopts the positive list, in the sense that all services are on the particular mode of supply and particular sector of services is only liberalized if it is included in one member's schedule of concessions. And it also has the same similar exclusion, similar carve-outs. In the protocol on services, it also excludes services supply in the exercise of governmental authority. It also excludes public procurement and measure affecting air traffic rights. Well, I believe that here, for instance, the exclusion of measures affecting air traffic rights were something where that they could have been more creative, in the sense that there's a Yamoussoukro Convention, declaration or decision somehow, which actually aim at liberalizing intra-African aviation market. So I believe that they should, at some point in the negotiation, they should not have excluded the.
I'm going to stop you there, Regis, because we are running out of time. You have run out of time, but I think you have made the points very well. The fact that the services protocol is building on the GATT, I think, is the key point. And you are right. I mean, it couldn't have been otherwise, because we have many of 3/4 of the African countries negotiating this are already parties to the GATT itself. So I think that's a very, very strong point. So to the participants, please feel free to put any questions at any moment in the Q&A box on the screen, and then we'll be coming back to you as we go. So now I'm going to ask Ohio, please, if you can talk to us about the CFTA and especially the role of subnational governments. Please, Ohio, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Melaku, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation. So when we talk about, or when I talk about subnational governments or a role for them, it's something that has been central to my research work during my PhD and subsequently. We should all be familiar with the literature and in terms of the cases we see that have come up across both in the WTO jurisprudence and also within some NAFTA relating to investment that kind of identifies, I would say, a very critical role that is played by subnational governments. They could be, how would I put it? They could be supporters of economic integration. They could also provide resistance to it, sometimes disruption, I would say. And in that context, I am really interested in how the AFCFTA agreement kind of responds to the potential for subnational governments across the continent, across the contracting parties to be able to not just, should I say, keep them or abate their potential contribution, but to accommodate it. And one of the first things that we need to bear in mind is what happens at the level of implementation. So we know that the constitutional regimes of national states, depending on how they receive international law, whether it's the monoism or dualism, has a key role to play in how the AFCFTA is implemented within the member states. Nigeria, which is of keen interest to me because it's a federal system, but not also to discountenance the fact that even politically decentralized systems and unitary systems also have this challenge. So in terms of how my key question, or I think the key point that I am musing on, and I would love to kind of welcome conversations on this, is how strong are the post-colonial constitutions across the African continent? How effective are they in providing, I would say, a balance between the ability of subnational governments not just to ratify or adopt the AFCFTA agreement and its associated protocols within their domestic settings, but how effective are they in the context of providing, I would call a point of scrutiny towards the central government of their respective countries. Why do I say this? Because in the fieldwork I've done, there's this tendency when you speak to government officials in, say, for instance, Nigeria, which I've done some fieldwork in that regard, and you ask them about the role of subnational governments, and they quickly dismiss you on the strength that the constitution is clear. It demarcates and gives exclusive jurisdiction to the central government to deal with issues of both foreign relations, economic diplomacy, and as well as international trade. And as much as it is clear constitutional-wise, we know that the reality, especially when it comes to federal systems, is that policies or measures taken at subnational level have the ability to bring the contracting party into dispute. And so I was looking at the AFCFTA protocol, and I noticed that the protocol on services as against the protocol on trade goods, and the framework agreement don't copy what we have in the GATT agreement. So the protocol on services specifies clearly that the contracting parties, any measures taken include the measures taken by local or regional government. And it makes it clear that they would be responsible for ensuring compliance by taking reasonable measures. So we have similar.
Can I stop you now, Ohio, please? Because again, you have run out of time.
4 minutes gone. Okay.
No, but again, I think the point has come out clearly, and questions are already starting to come through. So it will give us a number of opportunities to go back. I just want us to give our opening remarks, and then we will be in a conversation more properly. Vellah, I'm coming to you now. And your subject is mainly on the what we call the complex regime of regional competition schemes in the context of the CFTA. Would you like to say a few words on that? And you'll have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'll just go straight to the point. So I've addressed this similar problem in my article on cooperation and competition policy at the Manchester Journal of International Economic Law. And also Elizabeth Gashuri has written on the same on approaching competition policy under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So what I would like to say is that we are looking forward to have a competition policy which is homegrown, which is fit for Africa, which takes into consideration the peculiarities of the African market, and which also reflects the key developments that has happened in the African markets. And some of the key developments that I would like to sketch out, one of them is that we are building up on the efforts that has been led by the regional economic communities in Africa, such as COMESA, SADC, ECOWAS, and WIME. And also, unlike these earlier regional competition agencies that were established in the 1990s and 2000s, whereby some researchers say they were persuaded to adopt a regional level competition policy, the African Continental Policy Framework is happening at a time whereby we are having regional experiences at the regional level, and also national competition laws have also increased. The national competition agencies have increased the expertise. We are having increased knowledge from epistemic communities and also advocacy networks that this regime is going to build up. So we already have our own regional experiences, coupled with also national experiences. And therefore, I'm looking forward for a regime that is going to take into consideration specific sectors. I'm talking about sectors that affect the poor, that go back to the grassroots level, that will ensure that African entrepreneurs who are poor are able to enter into the market, that look at sectors such as food industry, cement, building up on studies that have been undertaken by networks such as the African Competition Network. So in an umbrella, I'm trying to say we are looking forward for a competition policy that is fit for Africa, and it can build up on the work that has been undertaken by Professor Elena Fox and Mo Bakom in the book on Making Markets Work Africa, and also on a project I'm working together with my professor Tim Bute on the research agenda for the African competition policy. And also we're looking forward for the complexity which we're talking about, having numerous regional competition agencies that lead to overlapping membership, because you know most of African countries are members of more than one regional economic community. For example, Eswatini is a member of SAC, is a member of SADC, is a member of COMESA. So how COMESA, for instance, has been able to address this jurisdiction conflict is a case that we would like this, the negotiators of the competition policy under the FTA to look at. Another important issue to consider is the evidence of cross-border cases across. And I think the Center for Competition Regulation and Economic Development in Africa, CRED, has really done considerable work on this issue, espousing some of the international cartels that have occurred within the southern region. And this protocol can also build on this issue. And also, in addition to that, novel market areas such as e-commerce, how to address competition concerns in pandemics, which we should learn from the COVID-19, is also a big area that I would advise the negotiators for this protocol to look into. And finally, would say that we are ready to provide expertise in this area if they so need, especially for those who've taken a considerable time to work on the African competition regime and also on the international regime. Yeah. And finally, we need a protocol that will align itself with the goals of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And the major goal of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is to enhance intra-regional trade. So we should have a protocol that seeks to complement trade, seeks to spur trade, not one that will have detrimental implications on trade. So if we are having a competition policy that links trade, ensures that there's legal certainty, small entrepreneurs are able to enter the market and so on, that is really what I'm looking for.
Very good. Thank you, Vellah. Earlier, I thought you were just to say, I'm done, which was exactly on time, but then you started and then I gave you a few more minutes. Okay, and questions are also coming, colleagues, so brace yourself. Very, very nice questions are coming already. So now I'm going to come to you, BC. And yours is going to be specially focusing on the dispute settlement system in the context of the bigger developmental aspirations of the continent, as well as even the bigger question of regime complexity. Please, 4 minutes.
Okay, all right. So thank you very much, Melaku, and to everyone at SIEL and to my colleagues on the panel. I think it's important, first of all, to sort of locate the dispute settlement mechanism of the AFCFTA in the context of not only the regimes in Africa, but also the WTO. So the DSM, that's the dispute settlement mechanism of the AFCFTA, really is modeled after the WTO dispute mechanism. So that's the first point. The second point is that transplantation is not the first time African states have undertaken to embed a WTO system of dispute settlement in their agreements. It exists in some other agreements on the continent. But a third point, which I think is important, is to say that the dispute settlement mechanism that's anticipated under the DSM of the AFCFTA is going really to be nestled in the context of many other forms of settlement of dispute in Africa. Now, while these other dispute settlement mechanisms exist at the sub-regional level, in that they are courts of justice belonging to that part of the economic community of West African states or the East African community, the SADC tribunal was suspended, and we have the OHADA as well going on. That really creates a form of problem that some scholars have referred to as regime complexity for the continent. One language by which, or concept by which this has been rendered, is also overlapping regimes. Now, you can speak to regime complexity in maybe a national context, for example, where you imagine overlaps. Or you can also speak to it in the international context. So once we get to international regime complexity, which scholars like Karen Alter have written about, our Titila Adebola has written about it in the context of IP, James Gethi, Larry Alpha have all written about this as well. What that really creates is that there's a problem here that states are confronted with a choice. And in fact, Yus Pauline has written about this. Do we go to the WTO DSM, which has never been used by African states? Or why, are we embedding this system, which it looks like we are against in our own regimes? Do we not show our hands as maybe unwilling to go that far if that is the regime we are taking on board? So really, to not take too much point, I think, in this opening salvo, my point is that African states, with due respect, haven't shown enough willingness in dispute settlement mechanism to at least convince people who've been working about these that they will take this regime seriously. The East African Community Court of Justice is probably the only court at the forefront of pushing the boundaries of trade-related economic integration disputes on the continent. Otherwise, all these other courts were before now courts without cases until they expanded some of them, their jurisdiction to cover disputes related to human rights and environmental justice and all sorts of things. So to just leave it here, I won't say right now whether I'm an optimist or skeptic, but I'll let this round pass and then give some more comments later. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you so much, BC. You really were exactly on time, which is very much appreciated. Now, the participants are already starting to send their questions through, and you can see that we have a very qualified team of speakers here. Regis, who spoke first, he had just published a major article on the services protocol in the Journal of International Economic Law. Vellah on the same subject, on her subject in the Manchester Journal of International Economic Law. I know Ohio did his PhD on this exact subject. I had reasons to know why for his PhD, and of course you heard from BC that this is an area where he's working on. So let me start with the questions. The first question that came was how has the mobility been approached here? It is, I understand this is a reference to the mobility of people, the movement of persons across the border, I think. The first thing to say here, I think, is there is a protocol on movement of people that's negotiated at the Africa Union level, but slightly outside the framework of the CFTA. But I'm sure Regis might want to come in here because services trade also involves quite a lot of movement of people as part of services trade. Movement of the consumption abroad or movement of natural persons are two examples there. Regis, would you like to come in quickly?
Yes, as you just mentioned, there is the protocol related to the African Economic Community that actually for the freedom of people at the African Union level, which is not attached to the AFCTA. Even the dispute settlement system also is different from that of the AFCTA. Then there is this possibility to the trading services, or Mode 4, which is liberalized under the Protocol on Trading Services, in which private individuals can move to one country and establish themselves, and go to a foreign country and provide services in a temporary basis. So this is Mode 4 of trading services.
Very good. Thank you very much. Compatibility of the CFTA with WTO and the notification issues has come. Who would like to take it? Maybe BC would like to take that? The compatibility of the CFTA with the WTO, or whoever else wants to.
If I could pass it, only because I know Regis has written on this, on Afronomics law, and there was a debate around it. So if he doesn't mind, do you want to speak to that?
Please, Regis, please, unmute yourself first, Regis. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, BC, for that. Yes, regarding the WTO compatibility of the AFCTA protocol on goods and services, the services protocol already states that it's going to be Article 25 of the GATT PTAs. Basically, at the very beginning, the idea is to negotiate a WTO compatible trading services protocol. But regarding the goods protocol, then this is where the debate actually lies, in the sense that African countries have been notifying their PTAs or their trade agreements to the WTO under the enabling clause. So now the issue is whether they're going to continue with the practice or whether they're going to move away from that, given the ambition, which is to liberalize 90% of trade.
Some noise is coming from your side, I think. I don't know which one. Is it from your side?
Out there.
Okay, please. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So given the ambition to liberalize at least 90% of trade in the AFCTA, so there is a discussion as to whether the enabling clause is suited or whether they should actually go for a more ambitious notification by notifying under Article 24 of the GATT. So this is where the debate actually lies, although it is very difficult to sell to countries that have fought for long to get the special and differential treatment, to actually abandon it and go for a full-fledged agreement. Yet there is a possibility to say that because of the ambition of the AFCTA agreement, they should probably try to look whether they can notify under the Article 24 as full-fledged agreement or as a interim agreement. Or they can do both, basically. It's always possible, also practically, because there have been instances where trade agreements were notified under both enabling clause and Article 24.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. And I'm sure there is also Article 5, I think, of the GATS, which you yourself have written about extensively. So now the next question then is, the CFTA, is it a new brand, a new example of a new brand of Pan-Africanism, Pan-African neoliberalism? The moment somebody talks about an ism, I always cringe. I don't know what it means. So why is it a new brand of Pan-African neoliberalism? I would rather say it is an extension of established Pan-Africanism. In fact, I was rereading Kwame Nkrumah's book last week, and it was in the book in 1963 where I think this is the oldest reference that I know of an African common market. Kwame Nkrumah spoke about an African common market in 1963. So I would say instead of a new whatever the new stands for, I would rather say I think this is a continuation of a very long-held ambition, and that's where we stand. Unless anybody wants to add anything to this, probably I can take us to the next one, which is about the African diaspora.
So I can quickly add to that. I think Melaku, I like to push a little bit that while I agree with you on the historical aspects of Pan-Africanism, and which a lot has been done on, I think we risk assuming that it means one thing for Africans. I think it doesn't. And I think we need to unpack what it means for us as Africans. You know, for example, is Nigeria displaying a form of Pan-Africanism when Nigeria says we will delay signing the FCFTA? Rita Abrahamson, Professor Rita Abrahamson, she's a professor of political science at the University of Ottawa, wrote on the contending visions of Pan-Africanism. And the idea really is that African states instrumentalize it, you know, to their advantage at different times. I think the extent to which we are aware of these strands of Pan-Africanism, albeit locating it in the historical context, really helps us avoid the perceptive unanimity that we express at the continental level. But I'll leave it at that.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's a very good point. The next one then is about the African diaspora. How does the diaspora fit in the agreement is the question. Very difficult question. I would think that to my knowledge at least, I don't think there is any specific reference in the agreement to the diaspora, but I think we all know that the African diaspora has been considered for a long time as the sixth region at the AU level. We have the 5 regions within Africa. The African diaspora has been considered as the sixth region to mean that it's a very inclusive approach. And I think the African diaspora's entry point, again, we talked about Pan-Africanism. I acknowledge the diversity of views, but I think the Africa Union that we are talking about today, and especially the one where hoping to see as it evolves, I think is very much inclusive of the diaspora, which the moment you create a free trade area like this, a single market like this, I think the opportunity for engagement will only increase. But again, if anybody would like to add anything to this, please come in. Colleagues. Okay. So the next question then is the safety, what is the state of the investment protocol? Can I ask Vellah to talk about that? Because just like the competition protocol, I think the investment protocol is currently under negotiation. If you want to take it, Vellah, or someone else can come in.
Okay, I don't know much about the investment protocol, but what I think is that the negotiations are ongoing, and what happened is that the COVID-19 pandemic did derail the negotiations, but so far the drafts are not out yet. So I've not accessed any of them, yeah. Okay,
anybody else wants to add?
Yeah, but if I could add, and since this is about optimists and skeptics, I'm really not comfortable just giving, straight answers. I think we have to say that in as much as the negotiation is going on, we hope that, on the one hand, some of what some scholars have described as, innovative provisions of the Pan-African Investment Code Model Agreement will be folded into that protocol. But that this will be a hope to really be radical. Afronomics Law is doing a symposium right now on investor-state dispute settlement mechanism, right? And really, this is our own opportunity to, as you said in the introduction, Melaku, if we want to be rule makers, which is what McCann has always argued, then we need to be really innovative and radical in the changes that this negotiation should anticipate.
Very good. Thank you very much. And yes, I'll come to Regis. Please go ahead, Regis.
Yes,
Regis, please go ahead. Yeah.
If I could add something, which is just to complement what Bisi has just said, it also goes to the dispute settlement mechanism, because we don't know whether the investment protocol will actually allow individuals to have access to the courts. Meanwhile, we have to the dispute settlement mechanism, we don't know whether there will be dual mechanism to settle a dispute in the FCTA, because at the moment, only states can actually have access to the dispute settlement mechanism. So with the investment protocol, we don't know whether that will open the gate to actually private parties to have access to the dispute settlement mechanism, unlike the WTO mechanism, for instance. So this is where we can also be creative.
Okay. No, those are good points. I think as the investment protocol is part of the phase 2 process, just like IP and competition, as Vellah said, and we have the Pan-African Investment Code, very innovative, very progressive instrument, I think. But I know, as a matter of fact, that there have been debates, discussions about whether the Pan-African Investment Code is going to be incorporated into, or will even serve as a starting point for the negotiations. I don't know what the result of those discussions, but I know it's not something that's taken for granted just because we have the PIC. We are going to roll it over into an investment protocol. So those are issues. But again, as BC said, BC, you seem to be trying very hard to be on the skeptic side. I don't think you are going to sustain it. We are going to come back to you with the optimism tide anyway. So I think that's where we are. That's a very good point, Andy. Now,
can I draw your attention back to Brenda's question about Pan-Africanism, neoliberalism. There was an aspect of that question talking about how does the FTA address issues relating to race to the bottom, issues around human rights, environmental issues, increased inequality. I think we kind of skipped that.
We did, yes, so, you are right. Thank you for raising it. Please go ahead,
Yes. So if I could draw your attention to, there was an ex-ante human rights assessment, which was commissioned by Munich, I think. And it looked at a number of these issues in terms of the implication of the AFCFTA on human rights on the African continent. And there is a number of very pertinent points about what the negotiators need to be very conscious of in terms of not going for aggressive reduction of tariffs and missing out on the peculiarities that face the African continent. Issues such as the informal economy, how do you deal with the rules relating to that very, very important sector that has always formed a very key part of intra-African trade before we got to this point. And they also talked about, and I would quote, they said, that the negotiators should include the institutional and structural mechanisms in order to ensure that the CFTA can operate consistently with human rights and sustainable development principles. Now, in the agreement or the framework agreement, there are reference, pockets or kind of, I would say, sprinkles of mention or relating it back to the African Union Agenda 2063. But I think this is one area where I would place myself as a skeptic in terms of how do we operationalize or keep this synergy between the elements of the development or sustainable development goals and the Agenda 2063 and this aspect of the integration process. And I would say that I am not convinced at the moment that there are answers as to what structures or mechanisms would be in place to ensure that that liberalizing of trade is not prioritized over the development issues or challenges that we have on the African continent. I welcome views on that.
Okay, very good. Anybody who wants to come on that from the panel? Okay, BC.
No, I'll pass because there are other questions. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for that, Ohio. I think he brought us back to that issue, which was very important. What do the panelists consider to be the most important implementation challenge for the parts of CFTA? I will add my own point later, I think, but who wants to go first?
I mean, just the most. Okay, go ahead, Vellah, please.
Okay, what I think is the most challenging is the institutional design that will be adopted, and whether the FTA is going to push for a more mandatory kind of regime in the specific sectors that's going to look into, for example, the intellectual property investment or also competition policy. And also the commitment for member states, which a lot of our participants have raised the issue. And then the third one, I think it's its own relationship with the regional economic communities that are already existing, and which we know that the development and even the intra-regional trade within this region varies from one region to another. And just to answer one of our participants who has asked, what mechanism has the FTA put in place in order to address its relationship with these existing regional economic communities? And under Article 19.2 of the FTA agreement, it introduces a principle called principle of acquiesce, whereby it stipulates that the development of the efforts that these regional economic communities have, regional economic communities, regional trading arrangements have already undertaken will continue to exist. And so we are going to have much of a bottom-up approach whereby it's these efforts that are now going to converge at the top and make the FTA more successful. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Vellah. BC, you wanted to come on this?
If you don't mind, I'm happy to go on the next question from Gabrielle. I'll pass on it.
In that case, let me say a word or two on this question, because there is this is, I think, important in terms of the discussion we are having about skeptics and optimists as well. And I think this is an area where, when it comes to actual implementation, this is where many of us, I think, share a number of concerns. In some cases, if you look at the agreement itself does not clearly answer some really serious and long-term questions, for example, about the relationship between the Cfta and the regional economic communities. And then there are internal capacity challenges, and in some cases there is a tendency for many countries to sign agreements and just leave them as if they're political declarations rather than legal commitments. And finally, and a very important one, I think, is the role of external. I have co-authored an article for Afro-economic law on this, actually, on external arrangements. Like, for example, if different countries are signing different bilateral arrangements with non-African partners, such as the economic partnership agreements or like what's coming from the US and Kenya, then the integrity, the objective, the idea of moving forward together, I think, is going to be under question mark. So I think this is important. So let me go to the next one then, which BC wants to take the next question, I think. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. So, I was going to pick the one from Gabrielle, which is, many speak of the special flexibility approach within the AFCFTA, a new approach of variable levels. This flexibility refers more to substantive obligations in this, but is this flexibility relevant for dispute settlement? Now, so I think, Gabrielle, it's a very good question, and I think the first way I would like to pitch this is that there are substantive flexibility agreements, clauses that are in agreements, right? So at the level of the WTO, there are those special and differential treatments that you can generally refer to as flexibility provisions that accommodate the concerns of developing and least developed countries. But I think in the context of the African continent, James Gaffey's book really has done the work on this, and it is not an empty concept. It is a concept that has features, right? Some of the ones that he has argued is that, for example, it's a bulwark in the hands of African states to move against the international type of agreements, right? And that it gives these states the opportunity that they really desire to do things on their own terms. Now, relating this to the dispute settlement mechanism, I think, is a big challenge. And I think that's where your question is so good, is that African states have fallen short in that regard of living up to the rules-based underpinning of the AFCFTA as they claim, right? You look on the one hand, it looks like they have these celebratory declarations in the conclusion of the agreements, only when it comes to the implementation to get cold feet. So the extent to which we're committed to rules-based in the context of the dispute settlement mechanism really has a big question to be answered in the context of the flexibility framework. But I don't think that's enough question to dismiss or enough concern to dismiss the uniqueness of these regimes. I think these courts and I think we've written about this again some time ago. I have argued that the culture of dispute settlement in African states needs to be studied some more and written for what it is, in that it is not the usual type of dispute settlement that is confrontational. So maybe flexibility concept can be extended in that regard. It's a conversation to be had, but I hope that does it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. And there is a question from James Garthy saying, one of the major, comment on what we should all expect on day one of trading under the Cfta on January the 1st, 2021. I really hope, James, that this thing is going to happen as we all wish it and expect it. COVID has scrambled us all around, I think, and my understanding is there are still only 12 or so countries that have submitted their final tariff offers, for example, on goods. So if everything works, I think I would expect that the 90% ambition is going to happen, is expected to happen over 10 years. So I would expect each of the countries that are participating in this to create their own, special FTA columns in the tariff books. And when you go to the borders, the customs, they will be, checking the rules of origin, which still, again, are not really completed, but checking and making sure that you are subjected to the MFN rate reduced by 10%, starting from day one, from the first day of the trading under the Cfta, I think. Are all the systems ready to go? Again, as I said earlier, yes, about 30 countries have ratified it. But how about those countries that have ratified but may not have submitted their tariff schedules, their proposed commitments? I don't know how it's going to work out, but I think it's an important day. I'm looking forward to that. The Secretariat in Ghana, which has now started work despite COVID, and I think that's going to be critical. The relationship between the Secretariat in Ghana and the Commission in Addis is going to be important again, because I think a lot of the politics is going to be happening in Addis, while a lot of the technical work is going to be in Ghana, in Accra. So a lot of things to work out how we go, I think, but lots of opportunities, but I'm sure lots of challenges too. How then the FTA approach the barriers of the African countries faced at WTO DSCU? Would you like to, the DSCU, would you like to go back to BC or any of the others? Because BC, you spoke about the dispute settlement protocol earlier.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's just as I have then how EFC approach the barriers that it depends, right? First of all, you have to bring the parties to the court, to the dispute table. If they're not there, then it's still, as many people have said, I mean, courts in courts now without cases. So we'll have to see if the parties engage it. If they engage it, then there can be opportunity to really flesh out and interpret these rules and develop a body of jurisprudence that can speak to this question.
Thank you. There are a number of very interesting, important questions, but I'm afraid we are going to run out of time. So we have only 7 minutes left. So I think my suggestion is going to be now, I give each of the panelists 2 minutes to give us, I don't know, broad messages, their take on the discussion. I think there are a number of very good questions, and what I will try to do on some of them is I will try to sit and then write. If this thing stays live, I will write some answers of my own attempts, and then probably others can also do the same. But let me start with Vellah. Would you like to say a few words in 2 minutes?
Yeah, I would like to say that I'm still optimistic of the African Continental Free Trade Area, especially in the realm of increasing trade. And I know the pessimists are afraid of how African countries are going to react to this regime. But even if they do so, I believe in the business community and the private sector in pushing for the actual implementation of this regime in every aspect. So this is a people-centered kind of regime. And if it's going to benefit the people, then the benefits that are going to accrue from this regime are the ones that are going to spur its own implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who wants to go next? Ohio, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you so much for the very fruitful discussion and debate. And I would just want to say that, yes, I am not a skeptic, but I just believe the institutions in Africa have not really engaged with the broader multilateral system. But we're crafting something that I wouldn't say is so differentiated from what already exists in terms of other regional integration projects and the broader WTO system. So in that context, we need to learn from the lessons and look at areas where there have been pitfalls. And one of the areas which I would bring back to my area of interest, which is the issue of subnational government. We saw what happened during the ratification of the Canada-EU Cfta. And essentially, we must not discountenance the fact that subnational governments have a role to play. And I'll just end with this quote, which was published on the Brookings Institute's website. And it was a response to what happened with the border closures. And they argue that African leaders should embody the AFCFTA in their industrialization and broader socioeconomic development and governance, ensuring ownership at all levels of governance, whether local, subnational, national, subregional, or continental. Aligning with the AFCFTA, they should prioritize smart local and national strategies to enhance continental synergies and global competitiveness. We are not having that conversation yet in Africa. And the sooner we do, the better prepared we would be able to harness the best from the AFCFTA.
Thank you very much, Ohio. Regis, would you like to go?
Yes, yeah, the discussion was very, very interesting. Well, there are a lot of issues that have been raised during our discussion today, and then I would like to first say that the FTA is a good step towards the continental integration, in the sense that this is the first time that we are seeing this kind of involvement of African countries behind a specific project. Only the political commitment is very important in every trade negotiation. So you have a political commitment of member states. But as our discussion has also displayed, there is also a problem of implementation that we also need to actually focus on, in the sense that a lot of countries actually they just sign agreements without probably sometimes the administrative and the capacity to actually implement. And then this is where the special and differential treatment actually come into play. And it's only when we have this flexibility in place by which we play by different steps of implementation, where that we can actually have an agreement that actually cater to for everyone's needs. But the issue is also whether the language of the special and differential treatment actually allows countries to benefit from it. One is for sure that it's mandatory to seek to provide special and differential treatment, but it's also not mandatory. The flexibility for time frame of implementation is not mandatory. So the language there is not as stronger as as what we would have expected, in the sense that even at the WTO, this is one of the issues that have been the criticism that members have put to the WTO, in the sense that the agreement does not, the special and differential treatment are not written in a way that can be brought before the dispute settlement system. So this is some of the issues that you need to actually strengthen, and then so that the states that are not very well off should actually rely on these provisions to catch up. And regarding the access of individual private parties to the dispute settlement that one of the panelists have asked, currently this is one of the area where we should actually explore, because we know that states in Africa don't sue each one another. It's very difficult for countries to actually bring a case against one another. If access is not granted to private parties, there is a risk of having courts that are not functioning. So we should actually, yeah, we should.
BC, would you like to come in? Thank you very much, Regis.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone, and thanks, Melaku. as well as participants. I think I'll just say three things. I think to move away from the DSM, which I think we've talked about very well, I hope, if Melaku said I'm trying hard to be a skeptic, it's maybe because by nature I'm an optimist, right? So, so we have to be sincere though, that issues as it concerns informal economy in Africa, issues as it relates to border conflicts, resolution, unilateral actions, measures taken by African states, issues as they relate to the distributive concerns of this agreement beyond the flexibility, right? These are granular matters that goes down to the day-to-day living of the people on the street, which I think maybe goes to James' question, needs to be addressed. And so in as much as I've expressed, in my own views, some concerns with it, I don't know if I'm a skeptic. I think myself of optimists, but I acknowledge the concerns that the road along, or the road to the future is a very tough one. And it's not going to be just political commitment. Thanks.
Thank you, BC. I think you have disappointed me now, because I was hoping that you would end up being a pessimist rather than an optimist. But okay, I knew that was the joke. Now, I really enjoyed this whole exercise, but I really regret the fact that we couldn't entertain many really good questions, and even those that we tried, we had to be very quick, and they were not dealt with properly. That's my regret, honestly. Otherwise, I think this has been a very rich discussion, and I would like to thank SIEL for organizing this, and my panelists for a very wonderful, very rich discussions, conversations here, and the participants for bringing out so many interesting questions so quickly. The only thing I say here is, the FCFTA, when you look at the agreement as, as black letter lawyers, for example, you will find a lot of problems with it, a lot of, gaps, loopholes, etc., etc. And a lot of issues, not really addressed properly, because there was a feeling that, okay, let's make this a good start, and then we'll fix it as we go, is the mentality with which was negotiated. That I can tell you, because I have seen it from inside. But I think this is a great achievement. Remember, we tried many ways. We tried it to build it using Rex as the building blocks, and then we have this multiple overlapping, etc. things. And then now, all of us are talking about the individual countries effectively becoming the building blocks of the CFTA, essentially. So this is a very, very important move that we're making. Doesn't mean the Rex are going to be thrown away, but there is a change in paradigm, in approach here. And I'm very optimistic, very hopeful, and I see a lot of political commitment on the continent that we're up to something serious here. So that is the only point I would like to make. Apart from that, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. And I think unless Marcus is around with us to close, I'm going to say thank you very much and goodbye. Marcus, are you there?
I am, but you've said everything that I would say. I've certainly learned a lot. I think the feedback that we're receiving is indicative of that. I want to thank all of you for joining, and look out for our next SEAL conversation, which will happen sometime in late October, but we're nailing down the dates at this point. Stay safe, stay well, and we look forward to seeing you again. And thanks again to the panelists and to Melaku for doing a wonderful job. And thanks to everyone who joined tonight, or today for you. Tonight for me, today for most of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye, then.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
All the best.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do well.
Bye.